To inherit a fortune worth millions, he must first marry the school beauty. How do all the good things end up falling into your lap? Saito and Akane are arch rivals at school. They insult each other, yet they end up sleeping together at night. Who would have thought they'd get married young before even graduating high school? It all started 4 days ago, when Saito and Akane had another argument over a trivial matter in class. Akane's good friend Himari tried to mediate, puzzled why Akane always picked on Saito. This made Akane wonder too, as she seemed to get angry just from seeing Saito. Saito has a sister, Shisei, at school, who always comforts him when he's upset. Realizing this, Himari suddenly asked if Akane's constant nagging was because she cared about Saito. Embarrassed by her friend, Akane blurted out that she would never date Saito, even if he were the last man on earth. Coincidentally, Saito felt the same. After school, Saito was summoned by his grandfather for tea. Although he disliked his grandfather's authoritarian style, he had no choice since his grandfather controlled the family's finances. During Japan's economic downturn, it was his grandfather who transformed their struggling Hojo group into a world-class IT company. Despite being over 60, he still led the business from the front lines. Unexpectedly, Saito encountered Akane at the meeting, summoned by her grandmother. They started arguing again, but their grandparents were pleased to see them bickering, which reminded them of their own youth. At the dinner table, the couple never stopped talking, which made the elders reminisce about their younger days. Saito, uninterested in stories, asked bluntly what was the matter, only to hear both grandparents say in unison, "You two should get married." Saito and Akane thought they had misheard. Marry their mortal enemy? Was the world ending? It turned out that Saito's grandfather and Akane's grandmother had once been in love but never ended up together, each marrying someone else and living happily for decades. Now, with Saito's grandmother deceased for 10 years and Akane's grandfather also passed away, the elderly couple had reunited. Though they had enjoyed their lives, they still wished they had married from the start. Sadly, they could not turn back time, so they hoped their grandchildren would fulfill this dream. Hearing that she was being forced to marry Saito, Akane nearly cried. In her view, one should marry someone they truly love. Saito was shocked. Was his nemesis really so romantic? Of course, he also refused the marriage proposal. The grandparents were not surprised and revealed their trump card. With a clap, a subordinate brought in a stray dog, indicating that if Saito refused to marry, the Hojo group would be inherited by the dog, effectively cornering Saito. Then, Akane's grandmother pulled her aside and whispered something that softened Akane's stance. They were given 3 days to consider. After leaving the banquet, with tears in her eyes, Akane asked Saito what he planned to do. Saito found her distress quite endearing and asked what her grandmother had told her, but Akane refused to disclose it. Back home, Akane was conflicted. The reason she always opposed Saito was that he always outshone her. How could the second rank ever like the first rank? Unable to decide, she called her friend Himari, telling her about a friend who was being forced to marry someone she disliked due to family reasons, asking what she should do. Himari didn't hesitate to reply that she would refuse because she already had someone she liked and would only marry someone she loved. She didn't tell Akane who that person was. As for Akane's friend, if she didn't have someone she loved, marrying wouldn't really matter. Surprisingly, Akane was more concerned about having to do intimate things if she got married. Himari didn't mind this at all and even encouraged Akane, or rather her friend, to have more children. On the other hand, Saito was also suffering. The thought of marrying such a terrifying woman made him see a dark future. He could only confide in his sister Shisei, who sat on his lap and asked if he wanted to live freely or inherit the company. Naturally, he wanted both, but that wasn't possible. Shisei suggested choosing the company to live a better life first. She reassured him that even if he ended up scavenging for food, she would join him. No matter how difficult Saito's path might be, she would always stand by him. As the siblings were affectionate, Akane made her decision. 3 days later, they met with the grandparents again and unanimously agreed to marry. The elders were very pleased and even demanded they get married immediately. Everything was ready. The new house was prepared, their luggage had been moved in, and the marriage registration was complete. After leaving these instructions, the grandparents drove away. Left with no choice, they went inside to check out the house, which turned out to be quite luxurious. Saito instinctively locked the door, which Akane misinterpreted as him planning to take advantage of her. It wasn't hard to see why she might think that. The house was decorated like it was meant for a honeymoon. The bathroom was pink and plush, complete with a bubble bath. The elders' intentions were clear, and the bedroom had only one bed. Since they were married, sharing a bed seemed obvious. Hearing this from the grandfather, Saito felt uneasy and hurried to check for any hidden cameras in the bed, finding none. Akane was even more panicked, thinking Saito was a pervert who would ignore her protests for his own desires, keeping her up all night and making it impossible for her to go to school. To prevent Saito from getting his way, she carried a sharp pencil for self-defense. However, they still had to unpack. Just as she was about to go upstairs, she slipped and fell back into Saito's arms. The grandfather, showing some conscience, had ordered pizza for them. As Saito was about to eat, he saw Akane drooling over him, but she wasn't about to do something that only couples would do. Saito said they could still eat together even if they weren't a couple, but Akane misheard it as if he wanted to eat her. Saito was speechless and just handed her a slice to take back to her room. But the real problem came at night. They were forced to share the small bed. Despite trying to keep his distance, Saito could still feel the warmth from her back and the scent of her shampoo. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva, fearing he wouldn't last much longer. Akane, feeling vulnerable as the physically weaker one, repeatedly warned Saito not to make a move on her. She had never done anything intimate and had never even had a boyfriend. Fortunately, Saito is also inexperienced. Although their bodies are close, their hearts are far apart. For their own reasons, they must continue this marriage in name only. But Saito suddenly thought of a major problem. What if the grandparents asked them to have children? Akane panicked and curled up, accidentally ending up with Saito's hand on her buttocks. But really, Saito couldn't be blamed. It was just that the bed was too small. Just 3 days after marrying her archenemy, Akane surprisingly let Saito do as he pleased. The next morning, she threatened Saito never to reveal their marriage. But as soon as she entered the classroom, Himari asked her what she was chatting about with Saito. Akane awkwardly evaded the question, but their secret couldn't escape Saito's sister Shisei, who noticed the change in Saito's shampoo scent and the smell of a girl on him. She playfully bit Saito's neck and confidently asked if he was married. It turned out Shisei had investigated based on their grandfather's odd behavior, not only discovering Saito's marriage, but also that Akane was the bride. Shisei used this as leverage over Saito, though she hadn't yet decided what she wanted in return. After managing to deal with Shisei, Saito was confronted by Akane again, leading to another argument. Their classmates enjoyed their bickering, some even shipping them, thinking they were like a comedic married couple, unaware that they were actually married. That evening, Akane planned to store groceries in the fridge but found it packed with juices, all placed by Saito. To maintain a balanced diet, he had also stocked up on instant noodles and protein powder. Akane couldn't believe these could be considered cooking, and thought Saito was mad for trying so hard to convince himself that the awful-tasting drinks were palatable. Feeling it was too dangerous to let him continue, Akane decided to cook dinner herself, dreaming of Saito falling for her cooking. However, Saito was worried she might poison the food. His fears were unfounded. As it turned out, Akane could cook quite well. After inspecting the food and finding no suspicious items, he cautiously tried a bite, which unexpectedly brought back childhood memories. His compliment was merely that it was very ordinary, but to him, this carefully prepared ordinary meal was delicious. Not hearing the praise she expected, Akane snatched away Saito's meal, claiming she'd rather feed it to dogs than let him have any. Saito quickly grabbed it back and devoured it, ignoring Akane's cries, feeling utterly satisfied. The next morning, Akane called Saito to wake up. He, mistaking her for his sister as usual, pulled Akane into a hug and got punched for it. Akane also scolded him for not washing the dishes the previous night. Saito wasn't necessarily opposed to washing them. He just habitually waited several days to do it. This earned him another lecture from Akane. Besides not washing dishes, Saito also didn't take out the trash, leading to a concerning lifestyle for the cleanliness-loving Akane. Saito asked her not to interfere too much, causing both to worry about the sustainability of their marriage. That night, Saito's gaming disrupted Akane's studying. Coming out to see the screen display zombies, she was so scared that she immediately covered her eyes. The two then fought over the remote control. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was luggage sent to Saito, indicating that his grandfather was set on making him stay there. To be ready for more battles, Saito decided to take a bath, but upon opening the bathroom door, he found Akane asleep in the bathtub. He stepped out and closed the door, but realizing something was off, that she couldn't have slept through his entrance, he returned to try and wake her. It turned out she really was asleep, even talking in her sleep about Saito kneeling to apologize. As Akane began to slip, Saito rushed to support her, and both ended up on the floor, making a loud noise that finally woke her. Opening her eyes to see her naked arch-enemy was too much. Her first thought was that Saito had finally made a move. She yelled and chased him out, at a loss for words. Akane was furious at being seen naked by her own husband, but later calmed down, considering the possibility that she had accidentally fallen asleep in the tub and that Saito might have been trying to rescue her. So after getting into bed, Akane hesitantly tried to ask Saito for clarification, but Saito said he was going to sleep. Akane couldn't say anything and was sullen until the next day, bursting into tears when a friend showed concern. She confided in Himari, mentioning someone she had a strained relationship with, but wanted to get along better. Himari immediately guessed it was Saito, but Akane quickly denied it. Himari suggested that Akane should communicate properly with the person. On the other side, Saito couldn't help but vent to his sister about how living with Akane was like hell. Shisei suggested he get a divorce, but Saito disagreed. He had sacrificed too much already and was determined to take over the Hojo Corporation. Realizing this, he decided he had to try to get along with Akane. Shisei advised him to give Akane some leeway, noting that if he wanted to be the company's president, he would need to act similarly with others. Saito saw the sense in her words and decided to talk to Akane that day. However, upon opening the door, he saw an angry Akane and thought about postponing the talk. Unexpectedly, Akane pulled him aside, wanting to have a serious conversation. They both agreed to talk calmly due to their significant differences in personality and lifestyle. They decided to establish some ground rules both could accept. First, they agreed to share household chores since Akane had been doing all the work. Saito explained his habit of accumulating clothes and dishes before cleaning them, but Akane pointed out this could breed bacteria. Saito had to compromise on this. Akane then asked if he had any requests of her. Surprisingly, what concerned Saito the most was physical contact. Their bed was too small, so he hoped Akane could tolerate accidental touches. Akane acknowledged that some contact was inevitable, and sadly said that while Saito could touch her body on the bed, he absolutely must not put his hands under the covers. Thus, they set some rules and agreed to verbally express their gratitude to each other, as it would help improve their relationship. Akane immediately demanded that next time Saito must compliment her cooking, as she was hurt by his previous description of her carefully prepared meals as ordinary. Unbeknownst to her, ordinary was actually a compliment from Saito, but he didn't bother explaining and simply agreed to her request. Akane quickly called Himari to update her, thinking the issue was temporarily resolved. Hearing Saito's footsteps, she hung up, lied down, and told Saito he could touch her body, although Saito never intended to touch her deliberately. To show appreciation for Akane's care, Saito and his sister picked out a small fruitcake for her, knowing she liked fruitcakes because she mentioned it in a school publication in the first grade. Though Akane found Saito's memory almost unnerving, she expressed her gratitude and prepared a lavish dinner in thanks. Saito sincerely praised her cooking. Once they stopped arguing, the atmosphere around them was filled with a rosy glow, and they even washed dishes together. It was then that Saito realized how beautiful Akane's smile was. The relationship between Saito and Akane was improving. One evening, Akane even invited Saito to watch a cat documentary together. Although Saito wasn't interested, he ended up watching with her for 3 hours. Afterward, feeling a bit embarrassed, Akane suggested watching a movie Saito liked next time. But Saito preferred gaming over movies. Akane claimed she wasn't interested in games, yet she got hooked after just half an hour of playing. Saito was surprised to find himself enjoying such a pleasant time with his former rival. Later that night, he even covered Akane with a blanket, only to find she wasn't asleep, and took the opportunity to ask Saito to call her by her first name. After calling each other by their first names, both slept peacefully. At school, Akane stopped picking fights like before, which puzzled Himari. When did these two get along so well? Akane denied any close relationship with Saito. but accidentally called him by his first name. On the other side, Saito's sister Shisei noticed her brother reading a book about social interactions. Embarrassed, Saito admitted he wanted to improve his relationship with Akane. The book suggested that completing tasks together could strengthen relationships, so he invited Akane to go somewhere after school. Akane's first thought was, "Isn't this a date?" Saito quickly denied it, saying they were just going shopping. They agreed to meet after school, but just as school ended, Himari approached Akane, inviting her to her favorite parfait shop. Tempted, Akane decisively refused, saying she already had plans with someone Himari knew. Himari realized it must be Saito and suspected a date, deciding to join in. However, Akane refused and hurriedly escaped, accidentally stepping on Shisei, who was lying there on purpose. Confused by Shisei's logic, Akane quickly made an excuse and fled. After dodging several obstacles, Akane finally reached the school gate, reminding herself it wasn't a date. They were just shopping for necessities. Just then, Saito arrived. Typically, Akane handled the shopping since there was a store near their home. They went there as they needed some everyday groceries. Saito picked up a carton of eggs, but Akane reminded him to watch the price. There was no need for expensive eggs. In her element, Akane reliably compared prices and ingredients, aiming for the best value. They even caught a supermarket sale on chicken breasts. Akane handed her backpack to Saito and dove into the crowd. Unfortunately, the two high schoolers couldn't outmaneuver the fierce competition from the aunties. Still, Akane was determined to win next time, insisting Saito must join her in the fray next time, causing him to blush. On the way home, Saito couldn't help but praise Akane's practicality, commenting she'd make a great wife one day. Akane thought he was mocking her, forgetting they were already married. In the middle of the night, Akane woke up to find Saito so close and thought he had finally crossed a line. Saito quickly explained that she had moved in her sleep, and he hadn't moved to avoid waking her. He admitted he wanted to touch her cheek because she looked so cute sleeping. Akane, realizing the direct approach was best with Saito, even offered him a chance to touch her cheek before lying back down. And Saito managed to keep his composure. After waking up the next morning, both Saito and Akane felt a bit awkward. Akane, still troubled by the events of the previous night, accidentally burned the toast. Hearing the commotion, Saito rushed out from the bathroom not even fully dressed. However, Akane wasn't as surprised by this anymore, and Saito had started to proactively fulfill Akane's needs. Noticing Akane eyeing a poster for new bread, he immediately went and bought one for them to share. Unfortunately, Himari caught them in the act. Akane still didn't want others to know about their relationship and ended up arguing with Saito again, but the observant Himari had already seen through everything. They soon had another quiz at school. Akane had been studying late every day while Saito, who always scored perfectly, seemed to do nothing. He even claimed he wouldn't study just for an exam, which led to an angry Akane kicking him out of the study room. Nevertheless, the thoughtful Saito made a strawberry sandwich for Akane as a midnight snack, which turned out to be quite delicious. Fueled by the food, Akane felt more energized to study. Despite her lack of sleep and nearly fainting, she refused to rest, determined to outperform Saito in the upcoming exam, or eventually in the future. Himari reminded her that there was only 1 year left in high school and questioned if she planned to chase Saito to university if she didn't win. This made it sound as if Akane really admired Saito. That night, Saito brought another sandwich for Akane, but found her asleep with a feverishly hot forehead. He quickly carried her back to bed and discovered her temperature had soared to 40 degrees Celsius, with her body covered in cold sweat. Saito wiped her down with a towel, but even in her weakened state, Akane's mind was still on studying. She revealed her dream of becoming a doctor so her loved ones could be healthy, but her family couldn't afford medical school. Thus, she had made a deal with her grandmother. If she married Saito, her grandmother would pay for her education. Despite her efforts, she couldn't surpass the seemingly carefree Saito, filling her with resentment yet also admiration. Realizing what she had revealed, Akane became even more embarrassed, causing her temperature to spike to 42 degrees Celsius. Saito felt they needed to get to a hospital immediately, but Akane refused, seeing it as a waste of medical resources for just a fever. With no taxis available, Saito decided to carry her, unable to stand seeing his wife in pain. Akane's heart fluttered as Saito comforted her while running to the hospital, and she began to think that marrying her nemesis might not be so unbearable after all. A week later, Akane had recovered. She called Saito to wake up, wearing an apron, obviously having just made breakfast, giving off a vibe of an old married couple. However, upon arriving at school, Saito was flirted with by a blonde guy, Akane's good friend, Himari. This enraged Akane, who stormed over to remind Saito that now that he had her, he shouldn't be so close with other girls. Saito and Akane were getting along better and better, and Akane even began preparing bento for Saito. Just as he opened it at lunchtime, Shisei suddenly appeared, trying to snatch his bento under the pretext that as an older brother, he was obligated to feed his sister. Saito, naturally unwilling to share his beloved wife's bento, faced Shisei's act of playing the victim, which quickly garnered sympathy from other classmates who criticized him, asking, "What's wrong with sharing a little with your sister?" Having no choice, Saito agreed to share a bite. At that moment, Himari noticed something odd. Why did Saito and Akane's bentos look exactly alike? This sparked gossip among the classmates, speculating that Akane might have made Saito's bento too, and wondering if they were actually dating. Both of them denied in unison, saying they weren't dating because they were already married. However, they couldn't explain why their food was identical. Luckily, Shisei resolved this by quickly eating all the bento, which prevented any further comparison. Saito then gently patted his sister on the head. However, Himari still had doubts and took the opportunity to ask Saito alone if his bento was really made by Akane. Saito explained that they just used the same semi-prepared ingredients and reiterated that they were not dating. Himari was relieved and offered to help clear up the misunderstanding with their classmates. Shisei witnessed all this. That night, Akane was awakened by rustling noises and saw a shadowy figure behind the curtain. She screamed, waking Saito and pointing out the ghost. Saito saw nothing and went back to sleep. Akane insisted on staying awake and sought comfort in his arms. The next day, she saw the shadow again while studying in her room and heard footsteps in the living room. Saito suggested she take a photo with her phone, but Akane refused, claiming the phone could explode due to ghostly interference, so she decided to study in Saito's study instead. Saito, not wanting her to stay there alone, had to accompany her everywhere, even to the bathroom. Misunderstanding the situation, people might think it was an invitation. Saito, unable to resist the temptation, stood guard at the bathroom door, which had a glass door through which he could faintly see Akane's silhouette. He turned away and recited calming mantras. But when he didn't respond immediately, Akane, thinking he had left, opened the door naked to look for him. Such incidents were countless, and Saito was exhausted. He went to his sister for comfort. Shisei, fully supportive, opened her arms for him to indulge in sibling affection, promising to embrace all aspects of him. Saito lifted Shisei, telling her to stop the nonsense before discussing the ghostly issues at home. Akane was terrified, thinking their home was haunted and unable to do anything alone. Shisei immediately took on a detective role, offering to uncover the truth. Alone in the classroom with Akane, Shisei confessed that she knew everything, claiming she had figured it out herself, and it wasn't related to her brother. Akane believed her and felt embarrassed for keeping secrets from her sister-in-law. Hearing that Shisei wanted to help with the ghost, she was even more grateful. Seeing her innocence, Shisei tricked her by saying if the ghost wasn't exorcised soon, Akane's grades might drop by 50 points. The method of exorcism, Shisei claimed, needed further investigation. Akane was now completely compliant. The couple then brought Shisei to their house, where she used the excuse of searching for evil spirits to explore their new home. She first investigated Saito's erotic study and found a pair of underwear that didn't smell like him, indicating they were washed. Disappointed, Shisei moved on to Akane's study, which had nothing unusual, and then to their bedroom, where Akane always saw a shadowy figure resembling a child. Whenever Akane shouted, the shadow disappeared. Shisei, piecing together the clues, fell into deep thought. Saito trusted his sister's intellect to solve the mystery, and soon enough, Shisei declared that she was the ghost. Based on the timing, location, and behavior of the sightings, there was no doubt the ghost was Shisei, who had visited their house days earlier with a key from their grandfather. She had kept it a secret not to disturb their romantic nights. The couple was speechless, the detective turning out to be the culprit. However, Shisei praised Akane's cooking as the best in the world, which delighted Akane so much that she prepared a large meal in her honor. Shisei ate heartily, getting food on her face, which Saito naturally wiped off. Akane, watching them, felt something was off, thinking their closeness was a bit too much for siblings. Saito continued playing video games with Shisei, who even sat on his lap, having him teach her how to play hands-on. Later, they even mentioned that they usually bathed together. Akane was incredulous and insisted they bathe separately from now on. The siblings complied obediently. Tonight, Shisei was staying over, and by the time Akane finished her bath and returned to her room, Saito had already prepared the guest bedding for Shisei, telling her to go to sleep after finishing her game. Now, the couple finally had some alone time. Akane took this opportunity to express everything she had been hesitant to say in front of Shisei. Blushing, Akane confessed she wanted to be the first to play it with him. It turned out she was jealous of his sister. The conversation led to a small argument, which they found relieving. Akane then, with a flushed face, tried to remind Saito to maintain a distance from Shisei, but struggled to articulate it. Just then, she felt a touch on her bottom, followed by a touch on Saito's thigh. Both thought the other was being playful, only to find Shisei emerging between them, insisting she sleep with her brother, as they used to share a bed during her previous overnight visits. She added that if Akane wasn't comfortable, she would sleep on the floor and not interfere with their intimate moments. With things having come to this point, Akane felt compelled to plead with Shisei to stay and sleep with them. Shisei, astute as ever, realized Akane was jealous because of her close relationship with her brother, which made Akane upset. However, Shisei found this amusing. She had been worried about whether her brother would find happiness, but now she felt reassured. After saying this, she snuggled back into Saito's arms and fell soundly asleep. Why did the tsundere Akane become good friends with Himari? It was largely due to Himari's persistent pestering and finally winning her over with a parfait. Now, Himari shockingly said she wanted to pursue Akane's husband. One day, Himari suddenly asked Akane if she liked Saito, then confessed her own feelings for him, saying she admired him, especially his calm response during a sports event when a friend fainted and everyone else panicked. Himari endlessly praised Saito's qualities to Akane, eventually hoping Akane would help set them up. Surprisingly, Akane agreed. Back home, she observed Saito closely and directly asked him about his preference in girls. Saito didn't have specific preferences in women, but he did in food. He loved medium-rare steak. Akane then mischievously told Himari that he liked raw meat and raw garlic, which made Himari think her crush had a wild side, feeling even closer to him. Why did Akane know so much? She awkwardly dodged the question. That evening, when Akane told Saito they were having fish, he was visibly disappointed, having hoped for a medium-rare steak after her detailed questions earlier. Seeing Saito's anticipation, Akane felt responsible for her words and went shopping with him the next day, deepening their couple's vibe. Saito couldn't stop praising the steak Akane made, a stark contrast to his usual tough demeanor. Akane couldn't believe it and suspected a trap, but Saito explained the steak was so good he wanted it every day, as if they were already married, which they were. Akane assured him she would continue to cook for him. As Akane and Saito's relationship warmed, Himari began her own move, asking Saito what type of girl he liked. Saito said that love should not be about types, but about getting to know someone deeply. His genuine-sounding praises charmed Himari, who blushed and jokingly asked how he saw her, but quickly fled after asking. After Himari left, Shisei teased that Saito was giving off a ready-to-mate vibe. Meanwhile, Akane sneaked into Saito's room while he was gaming and found a secret notebook. She was about to peek when Saito entered, so she quickly asked for a book recommendation instead. Saito suggested A History of Humanity Through Food and Weapons, which Akane relayed to Himari. However, Himari didn't understand it, but saw a perfect reason to ask Saito for help. Watching them converse comfortably, Akane felt uneasy. But Saito's kindness to Himari was partly because whenever Akane argued with him, Himari was there to mediate. The conversation naturally turned to Akane, revealing how she had helped Himari against bullies in their childhood, complimenting her beautiful hair. Akane felt embarrassed hearing Himari praise her in front of Saito. Suddenly, Shisei popped in, asking if Akane was bothered by Himari and Saito's relationship, noting Himari's look whenever she saw Saito. Akane, struggling to find an excuse, insisted that Himari was too good for Saito. After their chat, Himari felt hopeful about pursuing Saito and decided to buy Akane's favorite strawberry tart as a thank you and planned a long chat at Akane's house. Akane was about to agree when she remembered she was living with Saito. She couldn't refuse her friend and told Saito to tidy up quickly. Before they could finish, Himari arrived eagerly with desserts. Saito had to hide in the kitchen as Akane stalled. Himari then asked if she could invite Saito on a date, believing Akane had liked him since high school and wouldn't interfere if Akane also had feelings for him. Akane vehemently denied any affection, accidentally disparaging Saito, which left him feeling bitter in the kitchen. The next day, Himari bravely asked Saito out on a date. Saito felt honored, while Akane listened from outside. Shisei teased her, questioning if she really wasn't going to stop them. Akane still wouldn't admit her true feelings and stubbornly wished Himari happiness. That evening, Saito told Akane about the date invitation, feeling it necessary to consult his wife. Akane, flustered, blurted out that their marriage was merely to fulfill each other's wishes and that his dating life didn't concern her. Saito felt disheartened, but didn't say much, only reminding Akane before leaving the next morning that he wouldn't go if she stopped him. Akane remained tough, only to rush and block him at the last moment, tearfully confessing she didn't want to see him shopping happily with another girl, even if only formally, as he was still her husband. Relieved to hear this, Saito revealed he had already declined Himari's invitation, having only used it to confirm whether Akane really disliked him. After breakfast, he playfully suggested going grocery shopping together. Himari greeted Saito as usual the next day. She had persisted similarly when initially trying to befriend Akane and was confident she could win Saito over. Overhearing this, Akane impulsively remarked, "I won't give up either." The next day, Himari brought Saito a homemade raw meat lunch, a misunderstanding caused by Akane's misinformation. Saito declined, but pressured by peers, reluctantly accepted. Surprisingly, the meat tasted good. It looked raw, but was actually cooked. Himari fed Saito piece by piece, which Akane couldn't stand. Himari then fed her too. Saito, always top of the class, was invited by Himari to a study group at her house. Akane intervened, so Himari invited her as well. With the top 3 students present, they all gathered at Akane and Saito's house. Starting from first grade math, Saito helped Himari understand concepts that had confused her at school. Himari praised Saito as a genius, and their closeness ignited Akane's fury. Shisei, always clingy to her brother, didn't consider Akane a legitimate wife. They took a break and played poker, with Saito winning decisively and stepping out to buy desserts, leaving the others to continue playing. Akane followed, teasing him about his exaggerated memory skills, which he thought might disgust her. Explaining his family's unusual mental abilities, Saito remarked he could remember trivial personal details, which often repulsed friends and family. However, Akane expressed envy, wishing she could remember details to better care for others. Saito was touched by her praise. When they returned, Himari and Shisei were busy gaming. Himari was surprised Akane would buy such a game, not knowing it was Saito's. Akane brushed it off and invited them for tea and snacks. Now completely smitten, Himari hoped to host the next study session at Saito's, but he tried to find an excuse to refuse. Accidentally spilling tea on himself, Saito quickly fetched a cloth, piquing Himari's curiosity about his knowledge of its location. While Shisei took Himari to clean up, Akane scolded Saito for being too close to Himari and neglecting to teach her. Their argument was interrupted by a power outage. Akane, frightened, clung to Saito, seizing the moment to ask if he preferred straightforward girls. Saito avoided a direct answer, assuring her that being herself was enough, and then showered her with compliments. Power returned just as Himari and Shisei re-entered, finding Akane clinging to Saito's arm, relieved at their apparent closeness. After that, whenever Himari encountered a problem she didn't understand, she would enthusiastically seek Saito's help. Not to be outdone, Akane asked Saito to teach her at home after he returned. Saito shared his knowledge freely. Although he never studied himself, his experimental teaching methods were highly effective for Akane, and she had the best results among those he had tested. Akane studied so intensely that she neglected sleep. Saito didn't understand why she was so diligent and wanted to know more about his wife. Akane revealed that she had a sister who was chronically ill and bedridden since childhood. Her parents worked tirelessly to pay for medical expenses, while Akane could only watch her sister suffer, which motivated her to become a doctor to help others like her sister, even though her sister had already passed away. This made Akane envious of Saito, who always spent time doing various activities with his sister Shisei. After sharing this, Akane became very somber. To cheer her up, Saito consulted Shisei, who suggested taking his sister-in-law to trendy shops or dessert cafes, having noticed Akane's girlish interests. Saito then invited Akane out, and she excitedly accepted and shared the news with her grandmother. Overjoyed to hear about their progress, her grandmother immediately took her to a special dressing room filled with various cute lingerie. Akane blushed and insisted she didn't need it, but her grandmother jokingly remarked that going without underwear on a first date might be too bold. Eventually, Akane emerged looking entirely refreshed, stunning Saito. Although both insisted it wasn't a date, it certainly seemed like one. Their first stop was a cat cafe, but Akane was on the blacklist there for being overly enthusiastic with the cats on a previous visit. Next, they went to a karaoke bar. Akane, having heard from Himari that kissing often happens during karaoke dates, worried Saito might make a move. Saito reminded her they weren't on a date, and they ended up having a great time singing together. Afterwards, Saito bought Akane a drink, which she enjoyed so much that she offered him a sip, knowing it was like an indirect kiss, but he declined. In a rare, quiet moment, Akane curiously asked why Saito wanted to take her out. He confessed that he felt responsible for making her recall her painful memories about her sister and wanted to lift her spirits. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Akane promised to follow him wherever he wanted to go next. They ended up at the only nutritional supplement tasting store in the country. Saito started sampling the pills enthusiastically, while Akane tried to stop him. But fortunately, thanks to her regular feeding him delicious food, he could no longer go back to plain protein shakes. On their way home, as they passed a store, Akane was drawn to a ring in the display. Saito offered to buy it, but it was priced beyond what high schoolers could afford. Akane immediately declined, but she was still grateful to Saito for the day out and gave him her sweetest smile, leaving him utterly captivated.